The morning the letter arrived, Tobenai's was already on the dusty pitch behind Ajegunle market, juggling a worn leather ball beneath a sun that hadn't yet climbed high, enough to punish the earth, and by nightfall, the girl he loved would look him dead in the eyes and tell him she never wanted to see him again, a lie so convincing it would nearly break them both. If you believe in second chances, in love that sacrifices instead of takes, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs a little hope today. And subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories, because this one is going to stay with you. Tobena was 19, broad-shouldered from years of hauling crates at his uncle's provision store. But on the pitch he moved like something lighter than himself, like the ball was an extension of his own breath. Everyone in the neighborhood knew his name. The old men who sat under the almond, tree-drinking Zobo called him Ronaldo of Ajegunle and placed bets on how many defenders he'd humiliate before lunch. But only one person actually believed the talk wasn't just talk, Ijeoma, the quiet girl who sold roasted corn by the roadside every evening after her shift at the tailoring shop, who had watched him play since they were both children with scraped knees and bigger dreams than their circumstances allowed. Ijeoma had a way of seeing him that no one else did. When scouts from a small regional academy first came to watch a local tournament, it was Ijeoma who noticed the man in the sunglasses scribbling in a notebook every time Tobena touched the ball. She grabbed his arm afterward, breathless, insisting this was his moment, that he needed to stop doubting himself and start believing he was made for more than crates of tinned tomatoes and warm soft drinks. Their friendship had deepened into something neither of them dared name at first, until one rainy evening under the shelter of her uncle's stall, when Tobena finally told her that every goal he scored thinking of the way she smiled when she believed in him. For 2 years, Ijeoma became the quiet architecture behind his dream. She saved money from her tailoring wages to buy him proper boots when his old ones split at the sole. She stayed up with him rehearsing the polite English phrases he'd need if scouts ever asked him questions in interviews, because his uncle had pulled him out of school at 14 and his confidence in formal speech was thin. She sat in the stands, in the sun, in the rain, in the harmattan dust, and she clapped until her palms ached. Their love grew the way things grow in poor neighborhoods, slowly, stubbornly out of cracks in the concrete, refusing to be anything less than beautiful despite having nothing handed to it. Then came the letter. A professional academy in Lagos, affiliated with a club that had produced 2 players who now wore national colors, was offering Tobena a trial. Not just a trial, a fully funded residential trial, 3 months room and board covered, with the very real possibility of a contract at the end of it. It was the kind of opportunity that came once, if it came at all, to boys from Ajegunle. Tobena ran the entire distance from the postbox to Ijeoma's stall, clutching the paper, like it might dissolve if he loosened his grip. And when he told her, she threw her arms around his neck and cried into his shoulder, right there in front of the corn-roasting fire, unashamed. But joy in that neighborhood rarely arrived without a shadow trailing behind it. Tobena's uncle, Namdi, the man who had raised him, since his parents died in a boat accident on the lagoon when Tobena was 11, had never approved of football as anything more than a distraction. Namdi ran the provision store on borrowed money, and he had long assumed Tobena would take over the business, marry respectably, and provide the stability the family had been chasing for a decade. When he learned about the academy letter, his anger was not loud but cold, the kind of cold that froze a house from the inside. He told Tobena that football was a gambler's fantasy, that if he left for Lagos and failed, he would return to nothing, because Namdi would not keep the store running for a boy chasing clouds. And then, in a moment of cruelty dressed as practicality, he said the real obstacle wasn't the club or the money, it was Ijeoma. A girl like that, poor, uneducated beyond primary school, with no family name to speak of, would only weigh him down. Scouts noticed distractions. Clubs did background checks. A young man arriving with a girlfriend and whispers of early marriage did not fit the disciplined image these academies wanted to build. Ijeoma overheard this conversation by accident. Standing outside the store's back window one humid afternoon, her basket of corn balanced forgotten on her hip, she heard Namdi's voice sharpen with warning. Heard him say that if Tobena truly loved that girl, he would prove it by leaving her behind. Because love that costs a boy his entire future wasn't love at all. It was selfishness wearing a prettier name. She did not hear Tobena's response, because she turned and walked away before her legs could betray her by shaking. That night, she made a decision that would nearly destroy her. She found Tobena at their usual spot near the old railway tracks, where they used to sit and watch the sun drop behind the tin roofs. She had rehearsed what she would say the entire walk there, forcing her voice into something flat and indifferent, something unrecognizable as her own. She told him it was over. She told him she had been offered a chance to travel north with a cousin who ran a bigger tailoring business, that she had grown tired of waiting around for a boy who spent more time with a ball than with her, that perhaps they had simply been young and mistaken about what they felt. Every word tasted like glass in her mouth, but she delivered them steadily, watching his face crumble in real time, watching disbelief turn to hurt, turn to a wounded anger he tried and failed to hide. He asked her, voice cracking, if she meant any of it. She told him yes, looked him directly in the eyes, and walked away before the tears blurring her vision could give her away. Tobena left for Lagos 3 weeks later, carrying a duffel bag and a heart that felt hollowed out. Convinced the girl he loved had simply stopped loving him, he threw himself into training with a ferocity that surprised even his coaches, using the ache in his chest as fuel on the pitch, because it was easier to run than to sit still with the pain. Word came back to Ajegunle in fragments over the following months, and he had impressed the coaching staff. He had been offered a developmental contract. He was being groomed for the reserve squad. His uncle, hearing the news, finally allowed himself something close to pride, though he never once mentioned the sacrifice that had cleared the path. Ijoma, meanwhile, never went north. There was no cousin, no bigger tailoring business. She stayed in Ajegunle, quietly nursing a grief she told no one about, continuing to roast corn by the roadside, watching from a distance as reports of Tobena's rising career drifted through the neighborhood like smoke. She kept a small folded clipping from a local sports pamphlet that mentioned his name, tucked inside her Bible, and some nights she allowed herself to take it out and simply look at it before putting it away again, as though even that small comfort were something she hadn't earned. If this story has touched something in you, if you've ever loved someone enough to let them go, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment and share it with someone who might need this reminder today that real love sometimes wears the mask of goodbye. It was nearly 2 years before the truth found its way to Tobena, delivered by his own cousin, who let slip during a phone call that Ijoma had never left Ajegunle at all, that there had been no cousin, no northern city, only a girl who stayed behind and cried where no one could see her. Tobena sat frozen on the edge of his bed in the academy dormitory, the phone pressed to his ear, piecing together 2 years of silence into a shape that finally made sense, and finally made him furious not at her, but at how much love it must have taken to lie that convincingly. Before you find out what happens next, drop a comment below with the word reunion. If you believe some love stories deserve a second chapter, I read every single one of them. He returned to Ajegunle on a Sunday afternoon, the sun high and unforgiving, and found her exactly where she had always been, roasting corn by the roadside, her hands moving with the same practiced patience he remembered. She looked up and the basket nearly slipped from her grip. He didn't say anything at first. He simply knelt down beside her stall, took the corn from her trembling hands, and told her he finally understood that he had spent 2 years angry at a version of her that never existed, and that whatever she had sacrificed to give him this chance, he intended to spend the rest of his life proving it hadn't been wasted. Ijoma wept then, fully without hiding. 2 years of held breath finally released into the open Lagos air, while around them the market continued its ordinary rhythm, unaware that it was witnessing the quiet, unglamorous miracle of a love that had refused to stay buried.